All right, have we been so dumbed down here in America that we don't even recognize communism when it's staring us right in the face? Let's head over to the swamp and see if we can't figure it out. Hey everybody, how's it going? Welcome back to the swamp. All right, the first thing you got to understand is that communism and socialism are basically the same thing. You know, the only difference is that communists wear a uniform and socialists wear a suit. You know, here's a simple explanation of how their spiel works and why it sounds so appealing to so many people. And you can see it at work right now in New York City with this latest Ugandan-born Muslim who just won the Democratic primary for mayor of New York City. This Jew-hating, Hamas-supporting Muslim running the city with the biggest Jewish population in the world outside of Tel Aviv. Unflipping believable. So yeah, I'm sure you've all seen this Zoltan MADMANI character. Yeah, I don't give a shit if I get his name wrong. Just listen to his Marxist talking points and you'll see it's the same old tired crap that they were spouting over 100 years ago in Russia. You know, workers of the world unite. You know, it's all really just a simple-minded ploy used by the elites. You know, it never seems to start with the people it supposedly is going to help. So yeah, these so-called intellectual elitists realize if they can get the masses behind them, you know, the working class, well, then they can pretty much overrun and control everything, which incidentally just happens to include all the money. That's using the class warfare scam. In the countries where communism took over, that was all they had, and it was all they needed. You know, like in Russia, all the people were pretty much the same race, color, and even religion. You know, the same as it was in China, Korea, Cuba, Vietnam, you know, all of those commie countries. But here in America, they have all kinds of new goodies to exploit. You know, they've got color, race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation. The list goes on and on. You know, it's like a never-ending oppressed victimhood heaven for them. And you know they love it. So here's how their game works. They try to convince us have-nots, meaning the vast majority of us normal working class citizens who aren't considered rich by any means. So they try to convince us that it's somehow not fair and that it's the wealthy people's, you know, the haves, you know, that it's their fault that we don't have what they do and that they got whatever they do have by unscrupulously or dishonestly using us to get it. You know, just trying to turn them into our enemy. And the crazy thing is, the people spewing all this nonsense are always the well-off elitists that they warn us about. Like that millionaire Bernie Sanders telling us how evil millionaires are. Or all of these white elitists telling us how evil white people are. You know, I know, it's crazy. The hypocrisy and lies are so obvious, it makes you wonder how so many people fall for that crock of shit. Well, actually they don't. Or at least they haven't before now. And if they do let that MADMANI guy be their candidate in the election, he'll get slaughtered. But just the fact that they openly put up an obvious commie is a big next step in their long-term agenda. You know, these woke, liberal, America-hating, God-hating, family-hating Democrats just never give up. Pitiful. The problem is that their followers, you know, those blue-haired, nose ring-wearing, freakish dregs of society, ignorant outcasts who blindly promote whatever they're told to. Well, the problem is that they're loud and visible. And that's because the mainstream media is all part of it too. In fact, this entire commie socialist movement couldn't even have gotten started without the mainstream media. And I'm not just talking news, it's like all of the TV shows, all of the commercials, most of the movies made, and even the music is all propaganda for their sick agenda. So yeah, I blame the mainstream media and the entire education system. I mean, we all see how stupid these young people seem to be these days, and how America rates almost dead last among the rest of the civilized countries in the world, when we should be first. You know, the reality is these kids are every bit as smart as kids ever were. Yeah, it's like if you don't teach a kid to read and write, the kid's not stupid, he just simply wasn't taught right. Which means 100% of the blame for our ignorant youth goes to the teachers and whoever gives them their marching orders. You know, these people are sick. You know, they would gladly sacrifice the education of multiple generations of kids just to advance their evil, commie, socialist agenda. Absolutely disgusting. Here's the kicker as to why their Marxist class warfare doesn't really work in America. It's because America's downtrodden. You know, the poor and hungry. Well, they live like kings compared to all those countries where it does work. You know, the so-called poor and hungry in America all have cell phones, TVs, cars, a house or an apartment. Well, whether they have a job or not, they still have all the luxuries that the real poor and hungry can only dream of. Even the homeless are much better off here in America. Okay, here's this week's stupid shit off the top of my...
Are you okay? You're bleeding, you know.
I bent kazoo fat.
What did you say?
I dent to Jew mad. I meant to do that. Yeah, I meant to do that.
Yeah, I bet.
Well, that's about it. Hope you liked what I said. All comments and questions are welcome, good and bad. You know I love them all. And please, if and you ain't done did it already, subscribe and like. Until next time, see ya at the swamp.